Welcome to the Faces of Melrose Real Estate. My name is Jean McAndrews. I am formerly a Stoneham resident, and I am currently a Melrose resident where I live with my family. I have a financial services background, and I am currently working with Christine Rocha from RE/MAX Leading Edge. Our monthly show will feature Lou Izzy from Bell & Izzy Law Firm, Chris Cower from Patriot Community Bank, and a vendor spotlight. This month's vendor is Don Bissix from Mystic Home Inspection, and our topic for the show is how to prepare for the spring market from a seller's point of view. Christine?
Thank you, Jean. First off, I want to say how excited I am to be launching this series, and I'd like to say a special thank you to Jeff Matte for offering to produce this series for us. Jeff is also a photographer and videographer, and I use him for all my listings, and he is just absolutely wonderful. So as Jean mentioned, my name is Christine Rocha. I am a realtor with RE/MAX Leading Edge. I've been with Leading Edge for just about 5 years now, and within that time, I have sold over $20 million worth of real estate. So I specialize in residential sales and work as both a buyer agent and a listing agent. I also live in Melrose with my husband Ron and our 2 children, Matthew and Paige. Our show really is it's about real estate. It's about real estate in Melrose and the surrounding communities. We're going to talk about the ins, the outs, the ups, the downs, the things we deal with on a daily basis with our clients. Our topics are going to be relevant to sellers and buyers and homeowners alike, because real estate is not just about buying and selling, but it's also about maintaining one's property. Before we really can look forward to preparing for our spring market, I think it's important for us to just take a look back at 2013 and see what that market was like. I think if anybody was in a real estate transaction in 2013, they can agree with really 3 different points. First, low interest rates. Second, low inventory. And third, cash buyers. We saw these 3 things over and over again. And as a result, we had more buyers than sellers in the market, and really bidding wars became a norm. In Melrose alone, we sold 248 single-family homes. Out of the 248, 127 of them, so more than half, sold for above asking, which is just incredible. Looking at 2014 now, if you are a seller and you are ready to go on the market, this is an incredible time to list your property. As of today, Melrose has 14 active homes on the market. So there is no competition whatsoever. So it really is a fantastic time. If I was to look into my crystal ball and make any predictions for the spring market of this year, I would say interest rates will be rising. However much, I'm not sure. However, I'm sure they will still be historically low. I feel more sellers will be getting into the market, so hopefully that will help with the buying frenzy that we saw last year. And where house prices are continuously climbing, I feel that cash buyers will be leaving the market as well.
So Christine, what should I do to get my house ready if I'm looking to sell it?
Absolutely. So when I first sit down with the seller, there are really, I guess I'd say 6 different points that I like to try and get across at our first meeting. So first and foremost is decluttering. I think sellers hear it time and time again, but you really do need to declutter your home. You need to clear things out, clear off surfaces, and anything that is not going to be coming with you to your new home should really not be there when we list your property. The next would be depersonalizing. And I know a lot of people don't like when I say these things, but you don't want to distract a buyer. So for instance, family photos, as wonderful as they are to have around, they are very distracting. When a buyer walks through, they're more interested in looking at the photos than they are the actual house. Next would be organization, neurotic organization. When buyers open up closets, when they open up cabinets, you really want to make sure that everything is neat, that it's aligned, that it's stacked on the shelves, that labels on the cans are all turned a certain way. I know it sounds crazy, but it really does reflect and look like a home is well maintained. Staging. Staging is something we hear about a lot. I would suggest that, as far as staging goes, if a room is supposed to be a bedroom, for example, it should be staged as a bedroom. Time and time again, buyers have a hard time visualizing. So if it's supposed to be a bedroom, you have a bed that will fit appropriately, whether it be a twin, a queen, a king. That way they can measure from their own standpoint how they want to use the room, and that the furniture will actually fit. Refreshing. refreshing is really a key. You really are setting a stage when you are listing your house. So you want to make sure the floors shine. You want to make sure the windows are clean. You want to take care of all the trim work. That seems to be the hardest hit spot in a house. So you want to, do those touch-ups, as far as any paint work is concerned. If furniture is looking a little tired, a slip cover is a wonderful way to freshen something like that up. Kitchens, bathrooms, that's what sells a house as well. If you don't want to make a big investment, do small things. Maybe paint out your kitchen cabinets to a color that's in the now. Change out the hardware. That's huge. In a bathroom, something as simple as a shower curtain or adding new towels. These are minor things, but they make a big, big difference. Lastly, I'd say curb appeal, because when buyers see a house on the market, the first thing they're going to do is take a ride by. And you want to make them as excited about the inside as they are about the outside. So I would say things like in the spring, obviously, the cutting of the grass, the laying of the mulch, the raking of the leaves, the placing of the flowers. It all makes a difference.
Okay, so now that my house is ready, what's my next step?
All right. You really do want and need a team of professionals when you're listing your house. You need a realtor, you need an attorney, you need a finance person if you're going on to actually buy a new property as well. So I think this would be a great time now to bring Luan and let him talk a little bit about the legal aspect of selling a home.
Okay.
So Lou, thank you so much for, being with us today. It's always a pleasure to see you.
Likewise, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So why don't you take a few minutes maybe and introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, as you mentioned, my name's Lou Izzy. I live here in Melrose with my wife and 3 children. And I've been practicing law here for the past 20 years with my law partner, Bob Bell. The firm name, as you mentioned, is Bell & Izzy.
Absolutely.
We're located right down here in downtown Melrose. We have a general practice firm, so we represent our clients' interests with respect to various matters from personal injury cases, landlord-tenant, business formation and development, elder planning, estate planning, and estate administration, and with a concentration on all things real estate, whether it be representing developers, buyers, sellers of residential or commercial properties, zoning, as well as lenders. So it's a general practice firm.
Wonderful. So obviously our topic today is preparing for the spring market. And when you first receive a call from a client, do you ever find that they're considering about selling a house on their own?
Yes, occasionally we do receive calls like that. And I neither encourage sellers nor discourage them from selling their own property. What I tend to do is lay out for them what I consider to be the important aspects of marketing their home, preparing it for sale, dealing with potential buyers, offers, and things along those lines. And generally, by the end of the conversation, they recognize that the time commitment and energy and expertise needed is not within their skill set, and so they typically turn it over to a professional.
Okay. And when a seller does decide to list with a broker, what can they expect?
Well,
What's their
generally, as you well know, there are going to be several preliminary documents that they execute to solidify their relationship with their real estate agent. So there'll be a listing agreement which, in its very basic form, will articulate what the expectations are, both of that real estate agent as well as the seller. And it'll set forth the duration of time that the listing agreement is in effect, as well as the compensation to be paid to that agent when she delivers a ready, willing, and able buyer. Beyond that, it's likely that a seller will be presented with a seller's disclosure form to complete. And that's a document that is not required by law to be completed by a seller. In our state, it's basically caveat emptor, buyer beware, with the exception of certain matters that the seller is aware of relative to health, safety, and structural issues. Those have to be disclosed. But for the most part, a seller is under no obligation to disclose what he or she knows about their property. That having been said, a seller's disclosure form has become commonplace in the industry, and it's likely that a seller is going to be asked to complete one. And should a seller choose to do so, he or she should complete that to the best of their ability and as honestly and openly as possible. Beyond that, as most homes in our area have been constructed prior to 1978,
Yes.
there is a lead paint disclosure form that's going to be necessary to be completed by the seller. There's no requirement that a seller test for lead paint,
Okay.
but certainly he or she has to disclose whether or not they've done so, and if they have and there are results, those results have to be presented. Otherwise, the form just asks that the seller indicate that no testing has been done. Those are the basic forms that sort of are presented to a seller at the initial stages.
The process going.
Beyond that, I would suggest to my seller clients that it might be a good idea to check with the building commissioner's office
Yes.
to see if there are any outstanding permits that need to be closed prior to sale of their property. Oftentimes, as construction improvements take place in the home, everyone's excited when the project is complete and you're utilizing that new space, and it's
Absolutely.
fantastic. And that last piece of the puzzle, that last sign-off and closing of the permit, isn't always done. So that you want to make sure that that's taken care of, because most savvy buyers these days are taking that step and checking with the building inspector's office to see if there are any open permits. So it might be a good idea for sellers to go ahead and take the
Absolutely.
initiative on that end.
Okay. So now a buyer has presented him or herself, and we have an accepted offer.
Yes.
What can be expected next?
Well, if the offer is acceptable to the seller, I
Mhm.
strongly encourage that seller not to sign that offer until such time as it's been reviewed by their attorney.
Okay.
Years ago, the initial offer may have been looked upon as just a preliminary document and not carry much weight, but case law over the past several years has proven otherwise. That document, that offer to purchase, more appropriately should be titled a contract to purchase, because once it is signed, it's a binding and legal document. And so it's important for a seller to have that document reviewed by their attorney and modified
Okay.
so that it sets forth the basic business terms that the parties have worked out, but it's not binding so as to cause that seller to be bound by the terms of that preliminary document. Really, it should only contemplate the signing of a more detailed document down the road, which is, as you know, the purchase and sale agreement. So preliminarily, that offer needs to be reviewed by the seller's attorney before it's signed.
Okay. So another great question then. When should an attorney get involved? When would you like to hear from the seller?
Well, I think it's important for a seller to contact their attorney as early on in the process as possible.
Okay.
You mentioned a moment ago about having a team in place, and I think that that was very appropriate and sound advice, because it's important for the seller to have the best representation possible, both with respect to a real estate agent, an attorney, as well as a financial person to help them transition to their next home. I also believe that it's very important for all three of those individuals, or four really,
Mhm.
to have open and fluid communication so that everybody is on the same page and working
Absolutely.
to protect the seller's interests. So I think it's important to be contacted by a seller, if not prior to marketing, certainly when they've established a relationship with a realtor, so that we can all communicate and effectively represent the interests of that seller.
Okay. All right, good. So now we have an accepted offer, and the next stage obviously is home inspection. How do you feel about the home inspection issues?
Well, I view home inspection issues as more of a business aspect to the transaction as opposed to legal.
Absolutely.
And so while I stand ready to assist in any way that I can, I really think that it's those issues are best ironed out between the parties through their respective real estate agents. I will say, however, that in my opinion, the inspection should not be used to renegotiate the terms of the initial offer.
Mhm.
And sometimes you'll find that that buyers who have, for instance, walked over the front steps to a particular property to the open house and have noticed that those stairs, the brick mortar has deteriorated and the bricks are flaking, that buyer may take a look around, walk out, decide to come back at another time, walk back over those steps, view the property, and then decide to put an offer in. And then lo and behold, when the inspector points out, appropriately so, that those steps are in need of repair, the buyer is looking for a concession from the seller.
Yes.
In my opinion, that's not fair game at that point. In my opinion, the offer should reflect all things that the buyer can take into consideration when presenting that offer. So anything visible or reasonably available information to the buyer should be taken into consideration when that offer is submitted.
Okay. All right. So we have an accepted offer, and now we have a home inspection that either went well or negotiations have been satisfied. Right. What's next?
Next is that more lengthy document that you know all too
well,
which is a purchase and sale agreement. And that's really typically a 10 or 12-page document these days that in great detail outlines the roles, and the rights and responsibilities of each party moving forward to closing.
Okay.
And so that's a very detailed document. Years ago there used to be probably 3 or 4 boilerplate forms that were used within the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and certainly today there are as many quote-unquote boilerplates as there are PCs or Macs, because the era of boilerplate has gone by the wayside.
Sure.
So that these documents vary depending on who generates them.
Okay.
And so it's very important, again, for the seller's attorney to take a look at that document and make sure that the seller, number one, the seller's interests are being protected, and number two, making sure that that seller is not being obligated to do things that he or she has not agreed to or otherwise wouldn't be obligated to do. So it's very important that that document be reviewed and negotiated on behalf of the seller.
Okay. All right, wonderful. Well, you know, obviously that was a wonderful review of both the selling aspect when it comes all the way up to the purchase and sale.
Sure.
And I guess we will look forward to future comments on the closing aspect.
That'd be great, because certainly the key to all of this, or the goal, is to see that property sold.
Yes.
And so, you know, a seller looks forward to that date, and certainly at the time of closing, there are other documents that need to be signed. There may be some other issues that arise between the time of purchase and sale agreement and closing.
Sure.
And I look forward to talking about that with you some other time.
Thank you, Lou.
Thank you.
So welcome back, and now joining us is Dawn Bissix from Mystic Home Inspection.
Thank you, Dawn, for being here today. Dawn Bissix is actually the president and founder of Mystic Home Inspection. He has been a professional home inspector for 10 years now in Eastern Massachusetts. Dawn is a member of ASHI, which is American Society of Home Inspectors.
That's right.
Where he is also, or has been, a board member in the Eastern Division anyway since 2008.
That's right.
All right. Don's business is based here in Melrose, where he lives with his wife Janice and their 2 daughters, Carolyn and Leah. And he is a member of the Melrose Chamber of Commerce.
That's right.
Is that right?
That's right.
Am I leaving anything out, Don? I know we have
I
some.
think you have a lot.
Did I cover? Okay. All right. Wonderful. Well, Don, before we kind of get into the idea, and our topic today obviously is preparing for the spring market, I'd love to just hear your thoughts briefly on when someone is making that initial phone call to hire a home inspector, what are the qualifications they should be looking for?
I think for somebody who's looking for a home inspector, looking for experience.
Yes.
Now, in Massachusetts, home inspectors are licensed. So there's a threshold that comes along with that, that you don't have to worry about. Other states, anybody can be a home inspector. But they're licensed and overseen by the Board of Registration. So you get a certain amount of skill level there.
Okay.
Beyond that, you look for things like experience, because to be a home inspector, you need 125 inspections under your belt. Not many, really.
Okay.
So, but that's how you get started.
Okay.
So, But you look for experience, and the key is to talk to the inspector on the phone, find out how long they've been in business, how many inspections they've done, perhaps, if they're involved in organizations like ASHI, and then also if they are a member of ASHI, they might be a certified inspector, which means they have reached yet another level of professionalism in the industry.
Okay.
So, and then finally, all important is the type of report that gets delivered, because that's very different across inspectors.
Okay.
Some inspectors are still doing handwritten reports, and they do meet the requirements that way, I guess. But there are many that do digital computerized report, color pictures, narratives that describe the problems and with specific recommendations.
Absolutely, and they are so important.
So these are the things you could ask a prospective home inspector if you were looking to hire one.
Okay, very good, thank you. Now, when we think about preparing for the spring market, or even so, I know when I always see you, Don, it's always you and I representing the buyer side usually. So what I'd like to do in this segment is really kind of take it from a point of view of the seller. So if someone's been in their house now for a while, they may or may not realize what a home inspection really is. Could you kind of give us an overview of what it is and even what it isn't?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, if you've been in your house 20 years, you probably didn't have a home inspection. So what a home inspection is, it's a visual inspection of the house of things that are accessible and observable. In other words, we can't see through the wall to look at the water pipe, but we might see evidence on the wall that there's a problem behind that wall that might be water related.
Okay.
So this is the sort of analysis a home inspector does while they're walking around the house. They look like they're just looking around, but they're looking through.
Yes.
So that's what it is. What it is not an engineering study.
Okay.
It's not a code compliance inspection.
Okay.
It doesn't create a punch list, as mentioned earlier, is required of a seller to address.
Exactly.
So that's what it's not. Yeah, that's the best way to describe it.
All right, that's good. So now, what can a seller do? A home inspection's been scheduled. What can a seller do to prepare for that home inspection?
I think that the key thing is accessibility, meaning you want spaces accessible, including attics, crawl spaces, garages, closets. You can't pack the closet full of stuff if the water meter is behind down in the back.
Okay.
See, if the garage is packed with all your stuff, it can't really be inspected very well. The other kind of accessibility is the mechanicals. You want to make sure that the heating and cooling are accessible, the boiler, for example, or furnace, that the water meter is accessible, the electric panel is accessible. Because if any of these things cannot be inspected, then you know what the report is going to say? It's going to say that you should get these things cleared out and inspected. So from a seller's perspective, keeping those things, again, knowing that and keeping those things accessible is really important.
Okay, good, thank you. Now, what about after the inspection? What happens then?
After the inspection, the inspector sends a report to the buyer, potential buyer, and the buyer reviews that with their real estate professional, an attorney, or whatever. Now, in some cases, some issues have come up, and this is, that's where I recommend that. When they ask me what they should do, I recommend them to talk to their real estate agent, see what is customary in the area. But clearly, if there are things like structural and asbestos and safety issues, the real estate agent is most apt to know what is customary, and maybe the attorney. What is customary in the area to, and how the seller should respond to such requests.
Perfect, thank you. And then finally, if a seller, say, or a homeowner, is thinking about selling in the next 6 months to a year, is there anything they can do from your point of view to prepare for the sale of their home?
What's becoming more common is what we call a pre-market inspection, where a seller might actually hire their own home inspector. So, for example, if you were selling your house. That can be a full home inspection with a full report, or it can be a consultation.
Okay.
Like an hourly consultation, where maybe you just go through and get a heads up on the big things that maybe might scare a buyer away. Like the crack in that, like for example, you talked about staging and things that the real
Yes.
estate agent
Yes.
knows about,
Yeah.
paint colors, curb appeal. Inspectors don't care about that so much. We care more about the integrity of the structure,
Absolutely.
the mechanicals. How old are they? Are they going to hold up? And so if you hire your own inspector, you could get a heads up on those things. Choose to either disclose them and say the roof needs to be replaced so they don't become an issue.
Yes.
Or address it, especially if it's a safety issue. That's good for the current residents as well.
Absolutely.
So, like I say, I think those are the reasons that's becoming more common today.
Okay. All right, good. And as far as the consultation that you were talking about, maybe not the full home inspection, how long does that usually
Usually about an
last?
hour and a half.
About an hour and a half?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So pretty.
Yeah, we don't bother running the dishwasher.
No,
I mean,
exactly.
we don't test the doorknobs and check all the outlets, but we look at the electric panel, the heating system, the roof, the structure.
Major
Look at
mechanical, like
the
you
bigger
said.
things.
Yes.
Unless there's some particular concern,
That's true too.
then I might focus on that first.
That's true too.
Right here in Melrose, a couple months ago, I did one of these and found a lead water main. The pipe was made of lead, known carcinogen.
Yes.
Talk about,
Yes.
that will really scare people away.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the seller replaced the main, and it wasn't an issue.
Wonderful.
So,
Yeah.
All right.
yeah.
Anything else you can think of from a homeowner's perspective?
No, I think we got all our questions answered.
Wonderful.
Great.
Thank you so much, Dawn.
Great.
We
It's a pleasure
appreciate you
being
being
here. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Welcome back to the Faces of Melrose Real Estate. Now joining us is Chris Cower from Patriot Community Bank.
Now we get to talk numbers and rates. Chris, before we get started though, why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience?
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me here.
Absolutely.
I've been in the mortgage banking business for about 24 years. I live locally right here in the Melrose area with my wife Andrea and my 8-year-old son Camden. I work for Patriot Community Bank, which is a local community bank located right in Luan, and service this area right here in the Melrose is right in our footprint here.
Wonderful. Now, I know I get a question all the time, how's the market? So you must be getting the same question as far as what are the rates? Can you give us a little overview as far as maybe where the rates, where they started from, where we've come from as far as interest rates are concerned?
Sure. It's absolutely the biggest question that I get. Everybody wants to know what's your current rate.
Absolutely.
And being in the business for 24 years, I've been able to see interest rates change a lot over those 24 years. And historically, we're still at the very low end of that scale. I know I asked my dad, when he got his first mortgage back in the 50s, what he got for an interest rate. And his rate at that time was even higher than what interest rates are currently at. To give you a little bit of history over the past couple of years, the Federal Reserve stepped in and started buying mortgage-backed securities. So about 2 or 3, 4 years ago, interest rates started to come down as part of the Economic Recovery Act here in America. And that really was because the Federal Reserve was buying mortgage-backed security bonds. Interest rates kind of bottomed out in about September of 2012.
Okay.
The average 30-year fixed rate was about 3.625. 15-year rate was about 2.625. Shortly after that, the Federal Reserve started announcing that they really wanted to slow down the buying of those mortgage-backed securities. They wanted the private sector to come in as the economy started to stabilize, that they wanted to stop buying those at the rate that they were buying them at. So from that point on, rates started trickling up. Not dramatically, because they're still historically great right now. To give you an example, in September or a year later of 2013, the average 30-year fixed rate just started cracking the 4% range. So in a year, they went from 3.6 as an average 30-year to about 4%.
Okay.
And now we're sitting in lower to mid-4s, depending on what day of the month you look at it. So historically, though, they're still very, very good. But that's kind of what's happened over the last couple of years.
Okay. And when we think about now the spring market in 2014 and beyond, any predictions?
Well,
Crystal ball?
I wish I had one of those. I think certainly things are looking up. And what I mean by that is that rates are going to continue to go up.
Okay.
The American Association of Bankers announced recently that they feel that the 30-year fixed rates will probably crack the 5% barrier sometime later in 2014.
Okay.
And then they predicted them to settle in the low fives from there for the next 24 months or so. So again, I think they're going to continually rise, but not dramatically.
Right.
That nobody is saying that rates are going to be at 7 or 8% in the next couple of years or so. That they're still going to be, and again, historically, in the low fives is still a very good interest rate for a 30-year fixed rate mortgage.
Absolutely, absolutely. A question or a situation I run into an awful lot. So I have a seller, and they're listing their home, and they want to also buy another home. So now they've found a home, perhaps, before their house is actually sold. What can we do as far as moving forward with those people, or can we move forward?
Sure, it's a great question. And you know, first thing I want to say is that that's more common than people realize in this market. There's many times that people see the house that they want to buy, and they really haven't sold their house yet.
Absolutely.
And that's where it's really important to match yourself up or get pre-approved for a mortgage ahead of time, or have a conversation with your financial person and talk about that. Can I afford both mortgages for a short period of time? What's the likelihood of me being able to sell my current home quickly? Being able to prepare yourself financially to move into that house before you've sold your house. Again, some people are more qualified for that than others. There's also ways that we can pull equity out of your current home and use some of that equity as down payment
Okay.
on the new home. So when this house sells that you're in now, you will now have the mortgage that you really wanted long-term on the house that you're getting ready to buy. But the bottom line answer to that is that you really need to have a discussion early in that process, you know, with your mortgage professional, and he will give you the guidance whether you need to sell before you buy and get those dominoes lined up, or it's something like go right ahead. So if you do find that house right away or early in the process, you've prepared yourself, at least from the financial point of view, of whether you can move forward with it or not.
Okay. And any tips that you can give to sellers that would make them financially stable, I guess, in moving forward? You know, so if they were planning on selling and buying and preparing now to move ahead, any tips as far as?
That's a good question. I think one of the first things that you need to do is you really need to make sure that you take a little bit of time to find the right lender, someone that offers a wide variety of products, a lender that can match you up with the right type of mortgage. The mortgage that's good for you and your family may be different than the mortgage that I need or Christine needs for her needs. There's so many different mortgage products out there, whether fixed or adjustable rates. And again, matching them up to your needs depending on your age, how long you'll be in the property, things like that. And a good mortgage lender will almost ask you those type of questions ahead of time to ensure that you're getting the right mortgage. And again, at the same time, the goal would be to get you pre-approved for a mortgage. So when you have that pre-approval, you can go ahead and focus on buying your next house, knowing that the financial part of it is already in line and that you're ready to go. And a good pre-approval right now will really show that you're a serious buyer when you go to make any offers, and also give you a little bit of peace of mind when you're listing your house, knowing that you're okay financially to move forward and get your next house and what you're going to do.
Wonderful.
How long is the pre-approval process?
Pre-approvals typically last anywhere from 30 to 90 days, and that's because people's credit change. You know, what your credit looks like today may change. The debt that you have may change. And I always tell, at least my clients, when you're pre-approved, always keep your financial mortgage guy up to date on what you're doing financially. You know, if you're going to go buy a car, maybe let him know that, because that could affect the numbers. If your employment has changed, if something in your life has changed that could change the way that you want to structure your mortgage, keep him involved so that he can keep that pre-approval updated. But typically they last anywhere from 30 to 90 days.
Okay.
And you know, one of the other things that you want to consider is, before you contact the mortgage lender, you want to make sure you have like a pay stub together, make sure you have a recent bank statement, make sure that you have how much money that you're comfortable putting down in your next house, so that again, they can match you up with that right mortgage.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you very much, Chris. We appreciate you being
Well,
here,
thank you
Yes,
for
thank
sharing
for
your
having
rate
me. Thank you.
information.
No, they are really still very good, and historically they're at tremendously low points right now. So
Wonderful.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
this concludes today's show from the Faces of Melrose Real Estate. Please join us next month, and you can also catch us on our Facebook page, which will be titled The Faces of Melrose Real Estate. Our next month's show will talk about preparing for the spring market again from more of a buyer's perspective.
So again, I'm Christine Rocha. This is Faces of Melrose Real Estate, and we look forward to seeing you the next time. Thank you.